Let me show you guys one exercise that is commonly performed in the gym for your triceps that is a good tricep builder, but at the same time a shoulder destroyer. The exercise in question is a overhead tricep extension. This exercise is good because the strength curve of the movement is correct, right? When you're here and your muscle's long and you get a good stretch at the top, right? You're strongest, and that's when the load is at its greatest. And as you come up, the load unloads because right here you're parallel with gravity, right? There's nothing. I can hold something here all day, right? But the problem with this exercise is obviously you're in this position. And when you're in this position, all these structures are getting squeezed. And the more they get squeezed over time, the more they get injured. The more they get injured, the more your joint wears out. And once that happens, your days in the gym are numbered. Another reason why the overhead tricep extension is not a great exercise is because it's a bilateral exercise. And that means that one arm could potentially be pushing harder than the other. And it's very hard to know if that's happening, right? So you don't want to cause potential imbalances over time. Another reason why it's not great is because if you look at people while they're doing the exercise, they tend to tilt the dumbbell forward, right? And that then becomes almost like a front delt exercise. Now, the reason why that can become a bit of a front delt exercise is because as you're moving your arm overhead, you're also bringing it in front of your face, right? So now the dumbbell is potentially falling this way. So it's your front delts that are working to prevent that from happening. So it becomes a bit of a confused movement. And the point of the exercise isn't to work your front delts. The point of the exercise was to work your triceps. So that's just another problem that I've seen happen when watching people execute that exercise in the gym. Any exercise that takes your arm overhead over time will wear out the joints of your shoulders. There's all these structures here in the shoulder that are very fragile. And since we weren't designed evolutionarily to put our arms overhead, this is not a function that we were evolved to do over and over again, right? Over time, all these exercises that take you into this position will destroy your shoulder. So if there's any exercise that takes your arm overhead, always try and find a way to do it without going into those positions. Now you can take your arm overhead like this whenever you want, right? Without the load. But realistically, in your day-to-day life, you don't really often do this, right? It's a rare motion. It's not like you need to be doing overhead press or dumbbell press, to be able to like put a jar of whatever into the cupboard, right? So the idea that you need to be going overhead in your training is completely ridiculous. The key is in general to avoid any exercise that takes your arm overhead. As much as these exercises have been promoted as some sort of like absolute necessity for athleticism, you need to train on your feet, going overhead to be athletic. I've heard this stuff over the years. The truth is, anytime you do this, you're risking impingement, right? Anytime you start moving into this zone here, just doing it, you can feel if you have proprioceptive sensibilities, if you can understand and feel your body, you'll feel that right there is pinching. So why risk it? You can train every muscle in your body without going into these positions. Anyone that works a job where they have to put their arm overhead over and over again, they will have shoulder issues. It's an occupational hazard, right? So imagine you're doing that in the gym to try and build your shoulders, to try and build other muscles. In this case, you're trying to build your tricep. But the truth is, you're just destroying your shoulders. There's much better ways to train your triceps without damaging your shoulder joint. The fact is that this movement here can be done in various other positions that save your shoulder, right? The tricep only does this. This is its movement. What you want to do is find a way to train this movement with the right strength curve. You want it more difficult here, and as you start to shorten the muscle, you want it to become easier. So you need to think, how can I put myself in a position where I can do this with the right strength curve without risking other parts of my body? In this case, we're risking our shoulders, right? This exercise here, I understand that people are looking for that extra stretch, but it's just not worth it. So let me show you how you can just take any of these exercises and think about them differently, right? So we were doing this movement, right? The tricep wants to do this. That's all it wants to do, and it wants to do it with a clean strength curve. So we can do it this way, or we can just figure out a way to do this in a safer position, right? Okay, so now I'm lying down on the bench, right? And I want to figure out how to do this without impinging my shoulder. It's simple, right? I can just do a classic skull crusher. Same movement with zero shoulder impingement, right? Because for me to impinge my shoulder, I'd have to come up, up, up somewhere about here. But here, my shoulder's safe. And the strength curve here is perfect, right? Obviously, I would do it with two dumbbells. Because this exercise I can. But this is just a much, much better version of the previous exercise. There's a way to modify this exercise to get the stretch that the previous exercise had, but I wouldn't recommend it. But if you want to take the risk because you feel it's absolutely necessary that you get a loaded stretch for your triceps to grow, go ahead and do it. At the end of the day, people have to make their own assessments of which exercises are safe and which aren't. I wouldn't recommend it, but people got to do what they got to do. You can take this exercise, lean your upper arm bone back, and suddenly I'm getting a stretch on my tricep. So basically, the overhead tricep extension is a inferior exercise to basic skull crushers, mainly because of the impingement risk to your shoulders, right? We're in this game for the long run. One thing you do not want to injure is your shoulders. Once your shoulders go, so does your lifting career. Because without your shoulders, it's almost impossible to train your upper body correctly. And it will even have effects on your lower body. If you want to do movements with a barbell, you need to get into certain positions with your shoulder. If you want to do stuff like walking dumbbell lunges, just that friction in the shoulder as you're moving, as you're holding a dumbbell, all those things can become almost impossible if your shoulder gets inflamed and agitated and overused over years. The name of the game is longevity, right? The name of the game is to come in, make gains, reach the type of body you want to reach as easily as possible, as quickly as possible, and then be able to cruise and maintain that through the rest of your life. You always want to think about every exercise and think about the long-term risks, the risk-reward ratio of every exercise, and ask yourself if there isn't a better way to do the movements you're doing currently to change them out for better movements that will give you better results and a lower injury profile.